that we show that we were the deciders of all of these swing states. We have a movement that's clearly dedicated to punish the vice president for her genocide. You should never, never have ignored us. Send a message that the vice president lost at the hands of Muslim Americans. We will never endorse any genocider. The genocider was actually bombing our people, and the genocider who says they'll finish the job. My address is basically the swing states. We have won this debate.
The Abandon Harris campaign has been making waves across the United States. It has galvanized largely Muslims and conscientious Americans to build a coalition together to resist the genocidal administration through the ballot box. As you all know, elections are coming up on November the 5th. But the campaign has a lot of detractors, paid, maybe unpaid, Democratic people ready to defame them. But my guest today is relentless in his motivations. Professor Hassan Abdel Salam is one of the two founders of the Abandon Harris movement. He's also the executive director of the Civil Rights Alliance for America, which is the organization that is coordinating the Abandon Harris movement. Hassan Abdel Salam has been a professor of strategy, movements, and human rights for the past 12 years, and he joins us from the key battleground state of Michigan. Professor Abdel Salam, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome to the Thinking Muslim.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's amazing to connect, dear brother, and to be here with you and our audience all around the world. Assalamu alaikum to everyone.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Well, it's wonderful to have you with us. I know it's taken some weeks for us to get together, and that's really because, mashallah, you guys have been very, very busy. Just tell us about your movements in the last week or so. Where have you been, and what have you been up to?
Yeah, so I'm largely based here in Michigan, very nearby Dearborn. We have a campaign operational, a large team, supporters, volunteers. And so a lot of work is being conducted here in Michigan, but we're also traveling to ensure that our operations in all the swing states are full throttle, ready to go, heading towards November 5th. So that's Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Nevada, North Carolina, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and right here in Michigan. And so I've been also traveling just recently, been in Arizona, Minnesota, as well as Wisconsin. We had a press conference in Wisconsin, and then we turned to have a fundraiser with Jill Stein in Minneapolis, in Minnesota. And then I headed for Arizona, where we met with volunteers, really an amazing, amazing campaign that's being set in Phoenix and Tucson, and as well as a fundraiser, as speaking to people from all different backgrounds. For us, every single one of these states are critical. Many, many people have emphasized Michigan, and it truly is a critical state. It's very likely that Michigan will be the state that will determine the presidency, but we are greedy. We want to be sure that we have the highest level of real estate, that we show that we were the deciders of all of these swing states. And every single state that falls, that swings away from the vice president because of Abandon Harris, because of the Muslim American vote, increases our prowess and ensures that we're a credible threat as we move in to capture the two parties and send a signal to the political landscape. As you know, our strategy is not that we have a candidate, it's that we have a movement that's clearly dedicated to punish the vice president for her genocide, take the blame for her defeat on November 5th, and in so doing, buy power to send a signal to the political landscape that you should never, never have ignored us, and that now we can set the tone, the stage for the future of the Democratic Party, to bring a reckoning to the party, and then to also create a reorientation in the Republican Party. And we feel that as the signal will be undeniable and extremely clear, resounding, if many states, many of the swing states where Muslim Americans can make the difference, 1%, 0.5%, perhaps 10,000 votes, 1,000 votes, maybe even 100 votes in states like Michigan, Georgia, states like Arizona, Wisconsin. And in so doing, we will be able to establish that we were the deciders because of Gaza and because of the pernicious effects, pernicious impact of American foreign policy on the Ummah. So to create a remobilization and ensure in the future that we can have a significant say, not just a reckoning that will come to the Democratic Party that will look at the map and recognize that they can't win in 2028 without our blessing for the candidates, but also a reorientation in the Republican Party that will now finally see right before them, for the first time in the history of America, that Muslim Americans decided an election, a huge feat, and one which will garner us respect as well as an opportunity for us to transform the Republican Party as well. And so our task is great, but the first step is November 5th for all of these states to resoundingly send a message that the vice president lost at the hands of Muslim Americans, their allies, people of conscience.
That's really amazing. So you've got a number of objectives there. One objective is, of course, to punish the vice president and punish the Democrats for their genocide, and this genocide has happened through them and on their watch. And then you've got and you've got an objective to ensure that the blame for the loss is put on their position on Gaza and how they acted towards Gaza. And then you've got the post-election objective of changing the behaviors, I suppose, of the two big political parties. Now, where does the Green Party fit into all of this? Because, of course, unlike many in America, you've actually come out and endorsed the Green Party. So, how does the Green Party fit into this mix?
Yes, we've endorsed the Green Party as part of our strategy, a strategic vehicle that we think advances our goals in significant ways. We looked at the landscape. We've been researching since February at Bannon Biden and Bannon Harris, our leaders in the Committee on Candidate Selection. We've been working hard, interviewing many of the candidates, including Cornel West and Dr. Jill Stein and Claudia de la Cruz. And what we've come to see is that we need a vehicle that attracts Americans from all backgrounds, all across the nation, a vehicle that can have a clear message, that can promote and provide us with a clear message that we were the ones behind the defeat. And so the idea here is for people to see that the percentages of folks who voted for the Green Party is far greater. The numbers of people voting for the Green Party is far greater than the difference, the disparity between the two major candidates in the swing states, so that it's extremely clear that we are the source of influence, the power behind this election. We also feel that the Green Party best demonstrates on the issue of Gaza our position, seeking the end of the genocide, this rain of munitions and bombardments falling upon an innocent people on the verge of disintegration. The candidate, Dr. Jill Stein, has been arrested. She's been dedicated. She's proven herself. She's also shown in the past she doesn't fear the repercussions of attacks and slurs. She's extremely confident when she believes that she's on the side of conscience. And so we feel that she is a partner. As many might know, we don't agree with policies that she has promoted, but we believe that as a strategy to promote our power, she is as good as it gets in American politics. We do not believe that the Green Party will win the White House. And for us, victory is a demonstration of our prowess. And we are here to recapture the political landscape after demonstrating through our vehicle, the Green Party, that we have been successful. We'll turn to the two major parties and seek to capture each of them.
Some may say, your detractors may say that it's a good in itself for sure to punish the Democrats for what they've done. And it's certainly correct not to transfer those votes to Trump. And we'll come back to that in a second as to whether that is a wise thing or not. But the discussion then goes to whether it's an appropriate strategy to really create a revolution within the two political parties. Like how realistic do you think that is in 4 years' time? Do you really believe, even if you're successful in your immediate objectives, that the Democrats and the Republicans will be far more attuned to the voices of the Muslim community and foreign affairs when thinking about their manifestos and thinking about their political programs going forward?
Yes, and so there are two parts to this question. There's the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. In the Democratic Party, what we expect after a win, in other words, a victory that demonstrates that we were the decisive actors or one of the main players that led to the defeat of the vice president, we expect, as happened in the past, that many Democrats, both leaders, elites, as well as supporters, voters, everyday voters in the Democratic Party, will have a moment of shock, depression, followed by rationalization, then despair, and finally reconciliation when they come to realize that they have no other choice but to attract Muslim Americans back to the table. Many in the party will begin putting pressure and will actually go quite far in accusing the elites who came up with their strategy of ignoring us. Make no mistake that the Democratic Party decided to ignore us this past year. And so people will come to recognize that, and they will be seeing their leaders as being out of touch, tone deaf, and begin a transformation. This has happened before. The most recent was 2016, when the party believed that there was absolutely no way that they could lose this thing, even though the polling showed, aggregate polling demonstrated that it was neck and neck in many of the swing states. Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump. When Hillary Clinton lost, immediately the supporters, the media went sniffing around who caused this. And the culprit that they came to stating was again within the House of the Democratic Party. And we have been, for many around the world who might not know, now many decades, Muslim Americans have put their lot with the Democratic Party. We're seen as part of the Democratic family. Many count on us. We are not just voters, but many of our wealthy brothers and sisters gave enormous dollars, donations to Mr. Biden, fundraisers that were happening right in front of everyone in the entire country. And so this is something folks must understand. We're deeply embedded in the Democratic Party. We've had conversations with folks in the Democratic Party who are just holding onto their seats, hoping that the abandoned Harris threat is not going to come to fruition. And so what we saw in 2016 is people tried to identify the culprit. The culprit for them was Bernie Sanders, that Bernie Sanders did not come full-fledged behind Hillary Clinton. Bernie Sanders was someone who ran against Hillary in the primary. For us in American politics, we have a primary before the presidential candidates go head-to-head in the actual election. And so the primary decides who is the candidate within the two parties. The Democratic Party selects a candidate, the Republican Party selects a candidate. And in that process, candidates run, and there were two main candidates in 2016. Bernie Sanders was far more progressive, left, and fighting for climate change, trying to promote policies like universal health care. And Hillary Clinton, more establishment, the wife of the former President Bill Clinton, who was running previously a senator of New York, and a Secretary of State under Barack Obama during his presidency. When they ran against one another, Bernie Sanders managed to win many, many states during the primary, but he eventually lost. There was enormous frustration from the supporters of Bernie Sanders. They felt cheated for good reason. The Democratic establishment ensured that Hillary Clinton, their candidate, would win. And so what took place was, as soon as the election results were in and people were shocked, 3 states were lost: Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, which was perceived one time before 2016 as the blue wall, or a wall in which Democrats could never lose in these states in the Midwest. And each one fell to Donald Trump. The shock rippled across the nation and the Democratic Party. Literally, supporters were crying. They were in the streets. They were asking questions. They were putting pressure on the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party was cast in the media as foolish, as foolhardy. And people were trying to make clear that the decisions being made in this campaign were completely out of whack, which is curious because just a few days before, they were moving towards claiming that the victory for Hillary Clinton was in the works, was very evident. And so it was a very, very difficult experience. What happened then in 2020, so the election following, was that when Biden won the primary before he ran for the presidency, he understood what the landscape was like, and he ensured that leftist policies, progressive policies that Bernie Sanders was promoting for years would be part of his platform. They did a policy exchange. They brought people from his campaign, and he promoted domestic legislation to fight for climate change in this past 4 years. And so domestically, Biden, who is extremely conservative for a Democrat, he moved towards the left. And so he demonstrated one of the very typical things that happens in American politics is, in order to win, you ensure that you respond to those demanding policies within your party, in not only to ensure a win and consolidation and in anticipation of the actual election, as such as the one we're moving towards on November 5th, but also to maintain consolidation as well as unity throughout your administration. And he passed legislation called the Infrastructure Bill to promote climate change in response to these demands. What we expect is that Democrats, again, will cry, experience depression, put pressure on elites, and recognize that this issue is of very little concern to them. At the very least, you don't now need to worry or fear or feel distress at the picture. We had hoped that people would feel distress at the pictures of the amputated bodies, of the bones that we see through people's skin, our children. But instead, they will now feel the pressure, knowing that 4 years under a despicable presidency, and why we came out and we warned them, and we provided an ultimatum by October 31st to the president, and then we vowed to actively campaign against the president. And so we gave ample time. Why did this happen? Why did they ignore us? Just to stop a genocide? So they risked the country and they brought Trump just because of a genocide. And so we expect supporters will say what's clearly rational. It's only the end of a genocide. We have to shift our policies. We can't continue this way because we need Muslim Americans. And in the Republican Party, we're expecting a reorientation and them seeing us as a credible threat, and the fear of us running back to the Democrats. I can tell you right now, we will never endorse any genocider. The genocider was actually bombing our people, and the genocider who says they'll finish the job, Donald Trump. And so we will never come close to any of these candidates. We are a movement of conscience, and we believe we can win without ever endorsing either of these two political parties. But what I can tell you is that despite people worrying so badly, that today, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's witness, both parties are running after us, including the Republican Party, constantly seeking our endorsement, and we push them away. They're seeking to negotiate. They want to come halfway, they claim. They want to compromise. And this is news that we hear constantly in Biden-Harris. We have stood our ground, and we will never side with this candidate in the Republican Party. But this is for me to say that leverage works, punishment works. Imagine what we could achieve if we are the ones who have defeated the vice president.
No, I think there is a sensible argument there, but there is then a conversation to be had about post-election and whether, in effect, your relationship with the Green Party is an instrumental one. It's a temporary relationship. And in reality, you are basically calling for Muslim voters to return back to their home, the Democrats. And that's out of sync, actually, with, for example, more, maybe call them radical voices, but other voices within the community who are saying that to hell with the Democrats. You know, the Democrats have now never served the Muslim community on a social level and on international level. And we need to look permanently at third options. So, are you claiming that the Muslim community has a home in a reformed Democratic Party?
What I would say is that the Green Party that we're deploying, while temporary, we might have to be deploying and operating within the Green Party for some time. And so we would actually consider it our headquarters, our base from which we will operate to recapture Washington, D.C. And so this is a critical point that we don't know the expiry, and we will have to play hardball and deploy our leverage on an ongoing basis. And so when, to rephrase your question, we can actually ask, but when is that expiry date? And so the idea is that we don't quite know when, but we have clear conditions that we have to demonstrate that we will not ever buckle until the parties provide us options that protect this ummah. And we are hoping to use the Palestinian cause to mobilize our people as we have this past year in order to protect the ummah broadly. Right now, people shouting in prisons in Egypt and Syria and Arabia, the Rohingya being thrown by the Myanmar militia into refugee camps in Bangladesh, a good man, a just man imprisoned in Pakistan, and the Uyghurs in millions in detention, massive human rights violations as we speak. All of these promoted, enabled by American foreign policy. We could transform Washington, D.C. to at least barricade the evil that it has promoted and stop it so that prosperity and justice can be restored in an ummah that's filled with potential and hope and possibility. So yes, absolutely, brother. There is a type of paradox, a paradox that we are right now positioning ourselves on the nonviolent battlefield in which we're deploying the Green Party as a means to communicate to these two parties. We are seeking to build infrastructure from within the Green Party to bring in candidates for us to use it as a platform to voice our concerns and to negotiate with the parties. But the idea is to transform the parties who are seeking our votes. And so the capturing component is not that we will suddenly find ourselves in the party, working within it as candidates who are calling for some of the despicable policies. That approach, we will no longer do that. That was the approach of the past, in which people end up themselves getting captured. If you can't capture one, they'll capture you. And so we will have to maintain our distance, but also negotiate. The idea is that we want to be sure that we are the ones for which these two parties seek our blessings before they even put up their so-called establishment candidate in the primary that precedes the presidential races. So the race before the primary race. And that is where the power lies. And that is the part of the discussion in the Muslim community that's never actually taken place. And it comes from an understanding by strategist elites in the party who come to see that they cannot win without certain constituencies. It's happened in the past with other minorities. And we will be in constant conversation with these parties immediately after November 5th to ensure that they understand what our needs are, what our policies are, and that they hear from us in terms of our recommendations of the candidates. And similar, by the way, with the Republican Party that's seeking our interaction and our inclusion in the last months as we move towards the election.
So let me then turn to the Republicans and Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump has gone on an offensive in these key battleground states. I believe he was in Michigan a few days ago, and he's meeting with Arab American leaders. And actually, some leaders have come to endorse him. I note that the mayor of Hamtramck in Michigan State has endorsed Donald Trump, as well as a slew of other Muslim organizations. Now, I know you've said that the Republican Party is equally genocidal as the Democrats, and so that's you're morally objecting to the Republican Party and their stance. But wouldn't it pragmatically, at least, be the correct or the strongest position as a way of punishing the Democrats? In effect, you have two votes. You have the vote that you take away from the Democrats, and then the vote you give to the opposition to the Democrats. Wouldn't that be the most pragmatic move? How would you respond to that?
There is a logic to that argument, that no doubt that your vote actually counts twice mathematically versus your vote in the Green Party. We do believe that we can be victorious singly deploying the Green Party. The idea of voting for the Republican, unfortunately, is a losing cause as a community. Why? Because by actually putting your lot in the Republican Party, they now see you as having a single home in which you're bound to promote or put your hand in, promote the party and its logic. And so, what could take place is that they see us as having no other choice but to be in the Republican Party because we haven't gotten responses from the Democrats. And because they're in a type of competitive bid with each other, they'll look at the Democratic Party and say, well, the Democrats have literally given this community nothing. And so we can give them crumbs and still manage to salvage this thing. And because of that minimalism that's taken place, because our system is binary, this logic itself puts us again on this continuous slippery slope that led us to this very point where we have no voice, even when it's genocide. And so we have to hold both parties responsible for the genocide. We have to show we are a credible threat and that we will not put our lot in either party except when they respond to our demands, a permanent ceasefire, unconditional, as well as a full arms embargo. That the relationship between the state of Israel and the United States must be ruptured, that the state of Israel is an autocracy. This is what we, in my personal experience, having done research on the occupation 2022 that led to my detention and torture, that we discovered, my research assistant Khaled Khansu and I, with the youth, the 20 or 40 who worked with us, that the state of Israel is brilliant. It's brilliant in its marketing to cast itself as a light of righteous liberalism, despite what we saw at every turn in Jerusalem, in Silwan, in Al Khalil, that they are an autocratic state, destroying, attacking, imprisoning innocent people every single day. And so we have no other choice but to ensure that we have a clear message and that both parties withdraw their support from the state of Israel, and that finally we will not be funding this state. The United States is the single reason, is the single ultimate reason for this genocide, for this 76-year occupation, for the continuous attacks on Palestinians. And so this is why we cannot put our lot in either party. We're, in fact, for everyone to know, in a battle with both parties. We're trying to establish ourselves as a credible threat with both parties. And to do so, we need to stand a distance away and look at them and then cast ourselves as singular, united, demonstrating our numbers and our power in the votes that the Green Party will cast, and showing that we were the reason deciding this election with clarity. And so this is a critical piece of our strategy.
Professor Abdel Salam, as you know, I'm a foreigner, as one commentator mentioned, and I look at the politics from outside, and I've been following the polls quite closely. And nationally, Kamala Harris is leading in the polls, and I know that's misleading because, of course, it's really the 7 or so swing states that really matter, and it may come down to a handful of swing states where Muslims are a substantial minority. And so, you know, I completely agree with you that we've got a disproportionate impact on the outcome of this election. But if I was to follow social media, I'm seeing a slew of positive stories towards the Democrats. Black Americans are supporting the Democrats. Arab Americans have written a letter in support of the Democrats in Wisconsin, I think it was. We've got key media personalities who are against the genocide, but who are very openly supporting Kamala Harris. We've got writers in newspapers, and so I suppose the impression is given that Kamala Harris has got support from within the community. Is that how you're reading the impact of the Democrats and your impact, in fact, on these swing states and voters?
On the ground campaigning, and me delivering Friday prayers in different mosques in the swing states. Currently, my address is basically the swing states. As we travel from one state to the other, one of our primary sites of campaigning is a Friday prayer on the mimbar of the Prophet. May peace and blessings be upon him. And on that mimbar, whenever I speak about the importance of voting, people come right after the khutbah, they hug me. I still remember one man hugging me hard, saying, "Tell me who to vote. Tell me that person and I will vote." And I uttered, "Jill Stein," my mouth close to his ear. He said, "Sadaqt, I will do it." And I could tell you people come hugging, crying, wanting to do the right thing. When we launched in November, on November 1st, when Biden emerged, I could tell you when we were campaigning and bringing in community members, people were far more skeptical. Today, I could tell you there's been an evolution. We have won this debate. Our data is showing that overwhelmingly, when Muslims think about this question, they are ready to vote third party. They are denouncing both political parties. There are small minorities within the community voting for the Democrats and Republicans. They are extremely small, single-digit percentages, where we feel we have to do work, and that's why I'm campaigning. It's not even to make the case, the argument why the vice president must be punished, although we do always make that case. It's to get out the vote. Many people come to me smiling, saying, "Brother Hassan, doctor, I'm not going to vote. I'm not going to vote because both parties are genocidal." And then I say, "Brother, this what you just said is a forfeiture of your power. Oh, what should I do?" And so that is our task. It's turnout. It's people knowing that there is an option because they have bought into the binary structure of American politics, understandably. And so that is what we are seeking to do, is getting people out to vote. We have planning, canvassing, carpooling, busing. We've been doing now for weeks, flyering, tabling, mosques, groceries, at community centers. We want to be sure that we have our digital ads out, that we have our phone banking reaching all our likely voters, as well as our texting. To be sure that the vice president is defeated requires that our people know there is hope. And that's really been the task that we have. In terms of the Democratic Party, the Democrats do this all the time, put up an air of confidence. As you recall earlier, I mentioned 2016. They were headed for defeat, but they presented themselves as heading towards victory. What I see in the polling since the summer, even when the vice president was just named the presumptive nominee, I was actually concerned. And what I've been seeing is that the vice president is actually extremely weak. When I saw that it should have been her height, her peak in the summer, and she was just a few points ahead of her opponent. And I knew that typically what takes place in American politics is when someone is first nominated, or they go through their convention, meaning this whole theatrical event in which the party puts up the candidate and speaks to the nation. After that convention, they typically get something called a bounce in the polling. And when I saw that her bounce was just a few points, I knew that this race was going to be extremely close by the time we hit October. And so that's what I'm seeing in the numbers. And for all Muslims in the Ummah who are watching now, I could tell you something really intriguing about American democracy, is that in America, the majority does not get you the presidency. What happens is that there are very particular swing states, as we call it, states where it's typically known that the two candidates, the Republican and the Democrat, are neck and neck. And it's in these 5 to 9 states where the contest actually takes place. If you win these states, then you win the presidency. And in fact, this is to the extent to which you can win a minority of Americans, but by winning these states, you win. And Trump previously in 2016 won a minority of Americans, but because he won Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, he became the president. You win the Electoral College and not the majority of Americans. And so we know in our data, being 2 points ahead, for the Democrat to be 2 points ahead, as you might see in some polls, in aggregate polling, implies that the opponent can win this, not the popular vote, but the Electoral College vote. And so we're focusing singly in the swing states. We're very confident, and we know full well that the data is showing exactly what we're hoping for, which is that all these states are very close, and that then we are the deciders.
Are
There's
you?
a paradox, by
Yeah,
the way.
go on.
Yes, please. No, there's paradox here that what we needed was a map. This was this strategy devised in October of last year. We need a map in which we have multiple states in which the aggregate polling is neck and neck. Hence, the population of Muslims will be the deciding factor because we voted in droves for President Biden in 2020. And so when we withdraw support in these states can be lost by 10,000 votes, 1,000 votes, 100 votes. In other words, clearly, resoundingly, Muslim Americans decided these states. And so, paradoxically, for our strategy to work, we need these states to be neck and neck, and not that the opponent to the vice president is so way ahead.
Right, I understand. Now, are you appealing really to religious minded voters? Is that your main appeal when it comes to the Muslim community?
Our communications is one of moral reasoning and conscience. We have been calling out to Muslims and non-Muslims, and in fact, in our campaign, there are many non-Muslims from all backgrounds: Gen Z, progressives, African Americans, Latinos, Mothers Against Genocide, people who progressive in their ideology that have joined the campaign and that are engaged with us in interacting at the deepest levels. Our commitment is to follow our forefathers and foremothers: Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, John Lewis, people who have fought hard for civil rights. We constantly mention in our press conferences, in our messaging, in our communications with differing groups across the nation, that we remember and are guided by the Martin Luther King who spoke out against the Vietnam War. While we admire and constantly remember Martin Luther King, who sung songs, "We Shall Overcome" on that Selma Bridge, or the man who wrote a letter from a Birmingham jail being imprisoned, fighting for civil rights and the end of discrimination and the vicious, vicious Jim Crow segregation that plagued America. We are guided by the light of a man who believes and who believed a year before his assassination that America had a pernicious impact on the world in Vietnam, and that the last chapter of human rights is for us to promote and expand civil rights, not just to Americans, but to all people around the world. Here in America, we're beset by a plague of exceptionalism, one in which we believe that we stand above all other people and that we're indifferent to the shouts as they are subject to bombardment, torture, imprisonment. And we see this not just for those who suffer unjustly at the hands of dictators promoted and lodged their seats set by the American government throughout our ummah, from Pakistan to Egypt to Arabia, but also in the non-Muslim world, in Latin America, in many parts of Africa and Southeast Asia. And so we believe that we're heralding a movement to promote goodness in our foreign policy, that we should not be a warmongering power as we are today, a colonial settler power, one that totally transforms societies, invades, insurrects, attacks, kills, drones, as well as military in many countries around the world. And so we ask all people of conscience to come. And we also call on people of faith, Christians, Jewish Americans, Hindus, that join us every day in our campaign. We have folks from all different backgrounds, all religious backgrounds, but we also believe fundamentally that Muslim Americans, they want to do the right thing. And so we also talk of the words of our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a man who sought goodness not just for the ummah, but for the entirety of humanity. And so we believe that we are here to tell our people, remembering the words of our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace and blessings be upon him, that this ummah is like a body. When one part of it feels pain, its entirety feels pain. This ummah is feeling excruciating pain after this horrifying year. And for us, we believe and we follow the words of Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam in the 17th verse of the 28th surah in Surah Al-Qasas when he said, Ya Allah, you have favored me and I will never side with the criminals. We ask our brothers and sisters in America, never side with the criminals, the ones who promise you health care and social security, forgiveness of student debt, fighting climate change, and yet they shed blood across the planet. That when you save one person, you save all of humanity. And when you kill one person, you kill all of humanity. And so we speak to all our communities and we remind them of the words that come from within their traditions, the tradition of promoting goodness, that righteousness doesn't belong to a single community, a single people, that we're all motivated to do good, to follow our conscience, and hand in hand, we can work together. I can never forget that day a few feet away from the president's home on Delaware pavement, the bullhorn being passed from one person to other, youth from all different backgrounds, colored hair, progressives, African Americans, youth, elderly. And there they made me speak. I, mustering courage, resisting tears, I grabbed the bullhorn, brought it to my mouth, and there I said, my name is Hassan Abdel Salam. I'm a professor of human rights strategy and movement making. And in 2022, I was imprisoned and tortured at the hands of the Israeli government. And forever, I can never forget the moments in which, again and again, handcuffed, blindfolded, claustrophobic, laces out, dragged impatiently to my dungeon cell, poorly lit, there, my company, a toilet hole in the ground, the stench evident, scent profuse, my heart rate increasing. I hear the clanking of the keys behind the two metallic doors. The interrogators have come back, blindfold lifted. Why are you here? What does it mean that you're ending the occupation? Amran is behind these walls, Sheikh Sami is behind these walls, telling us that the youth who are working with us, calling for peaceful protest with us, were also being tortured and detained. And people come to us and ask us, why are you doing this? Why are you speaking out? Don't you know that they would have attacked you? And our single answer, my research assistant and I, is how can we not speak in this era of genocide? And so torture, imprisonment, attack, with these youth, when I shared this story, people from all backgrounds, telling them about the imprisonment, the youth we worked with, the torture I experienced at the hands of the Israelis, we saw tears. Tears, people, their hands under their eyes, people who we never met in mosque, people who are not Muslim. This movement that we have pursued since October doesn't just belong to Muslims. This is the pinnacle of da'wah, for us to go to our brothers and sisters in humanity, to side with them, to hold our hands, people of courage, people of conscience, to do the right thing. This is genocide. We want to all live in a safe planet. At the very least, many Americans are not malicious. All they want is goodness, and they fear the trajectory that America has set and the path that has been laid out. And they're there to say we reject it. And their hearts clean, filled with hope. And they cry with just a few stories of someone they just recently met.
Professor Abdel Salam, I think the world owes you a gratitude for the work you and your fellow members and organization has been doing since November last year. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you success and inshallah ta'ala allow us to reap the benefits of the work that you've done over this past year. Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much for your time today, Professor Abdel Salam.
Jazakumullah khair, my dear brother, and Jazakumullah khair for everything you do and speaking truth every single day, promoting goodness for our ummah, and constantly making sure that everyone receives the information they need as we move in. We call on all Americans to vote against genocide. We're seconds away from November 5th, a moment written in destiny that one day textbooks in 21st century American history courses will tell the story of this time. Be sure that when you go out and walk gently behind the curtain at the ballot box, You speak the truth. Speak the truth against the pharaohs in the White House who blistered and bombed, attacked, ignored us for a year when we merely asked for the end of genocide. And be sure that when you vote, that your great, 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 great grandchildren will valorize you and not be puzzled when they see the pictures of Gaza in that history textbook and they wonder, how could it have been that there were a people who voted for the vice president? And who are those heroes who voted and voted their conscience towards truth, defied the genociders in both major political parties, and ensured that it was the beginning of the end? November 5th is our destiny. Vote, vote as your great, great grandchildren would wish you would vote. وجزاكم الله خيرا والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Hayakallah, Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much, brother. Please remember to subscribe to our social media and YouTube channels and head over to our website thinkingmuslim.com to sign up to my weekly newsletter. Jazakallah khair.